I'm going to take you through the Gospel of Mark. Each time we're going to look at Christ from a different vantage point. First, we're going to look at what he did. And what I'm trying to teach you, and I'm going to mention this, and I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to tell you what we did, because I'd like to encourage you maybe to take the next step. Most Christians, they get the idea that when you get saved, you're supposed to read the Bible. Remember the story or the song we teach our children, read your Bible, pray every day, and you'll grow, 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 and don't read your Bible, don't pray, and you'll shrink, shrink, shrink. Well, most people get that down. They know that Christians are supposed to read their Bible. But after a while, if you've read it a few times, it's kind of like, okay, I've done that, now what? And that's the next step. And you have to read seeking or looking or aggressively. There's a young fellow that I've been encouraging to read through the Bible, and I said, you know what? I know how many good verses there are between Genesis and Isaiah. It took me one entire highlighter, a liquid, the kind that are half liquid, that are fluorescent. It ran out in Isaiah. That's how many good verses. So if you've underlined all the good verses, your highlighter will run out by Isaiah, okay? That's one way. But you need to read aggressively, and I'm going to teach you tonight one method of doing that, and this is called, in seminary, doing a Christology, Christology, a study of Christ. And when you study Christ, you study his names, his titles, his ascriptions, and his actions. That's what we're doing. First of all, we're going to look at his actions, what it was he did. Secondly, we're going to look at his self-description. Now, this is very important. What did Jesus say about himself? And finally, we're going to look at his ascriptions, or what others said about him. And it's interesting, everybody talks about Christ. His friends, his enemies, his family, demons. They all talk about him. And you know what's amazing? Only in the fabricated trial did they lie about him. All the other times, even his enemies were in such awe when they looked at him. Like, you never once find anybody denying he did miracles. We're talking about the people that killed him. They never denied it. That's a proof of who he was. Did you ever think about that? You never find even his greatest adversaries ever accusing him of doing any moral iniquity of any kind. Never. Except he was around sinners, but they never said he was a sinner. So that's what we're going to look at. Number one, we're going to look at what he did, and we'll see all the verses and go all the way through the book. Then secondly, what he said about himself, and finally, what others said about him. So basically three things: his actions, his description, and his reputation. What others said, what he said, what he did. And let me just start with verse 7 of chapter 1. And I just want to show you what I mean as an example. And this is Jesus being talked about by someone else. And this is the last round, but it's the closest to the front of the book, and I want you to see it. We'll start in verse 6. Now John, that's John the Baptist, not the Apostle John. This is one of Christ's relatives, his cousin. John was clothed with camel's hair, a leather belt around his waist. He probably was from Wall Street, a camel hair, sport coat, leather, one of those Land's End kind of real nice one around his waist. And he ate natural food. He didn't, look at that. Locusts and wild honey. And this guy would have fit right in. But look at verse 7. He preached saying, there comes one after me who is mightier than I. And look at this. His sandal strap, he says, I can't reach high enough to get. He says, I am so low, I am unworthy of even getting to untie his sandal. Now, if you know who John the Baptist is, the Lord said in Matthew 11, John the Baptist was the greatest human being that had ever been born up until that time. Jesus, who never lies, who is God, said John the Baptist was the greatest of all to that point. So the man that was standing on top of the pile of all humanity couldn't reach Jesus. Boy, we couldn't, and we can't, because we're less than him. Do you think about that? This man who was the greatest, John the Baptist, Jesus said, of all those born of women, he's the greatest. He couldn't reach Jesus. And see what this is saying, and we'll see when we come back through. John was saying Jesus is divine. He's saying humans can't touch him. He's not of this world. He has a human body, but he's above us. He's divine. So that's what we're going to look at.